Imagine every time you were in the car, the road was blocked by sheep. Thankfully, products like this prevent that from happening. And luckily for us, they're manufactured here in the UK.
I'm Rebecca Galley, I'm the CEO here at Tornado Wire, and I've been with the business almost 2 years now. Tornado is a fascinating business. The business was originally started in the very late 60s. A gentleman called Archie Burden Cooper was working with his family and decided he didn't want to get involved in the family business, which was hot dogs in Yorkshire. So instead, he went to manage a farm in central Scotland. And it was a big farm and it needed a lot of fencing. So he started to put, at the time it was electric fencing around the perimeter of the field in this farm. And the neighbouring farms thought this was a great idea, wanted fencing, and then it expanded from there. So originally Tornado was a contracting business, and the founder hired farm contractors who weren't busy all the time to do fencing. They were importing fencing from New Zealand, but realised, particularly when there were some challenges with that import route, they realised there was demand in the market for a high tensile fence, which was very different from what was being used in the market. And they saw a big opportunity to sell more of this product. Unfortunately, the import route was becoming more difficult. So Kenny and Archie decided the best thing to do was to manufacture high tensile fencing ourselves, or themselves as it was. So this was the early 80s, and at the time they had decided to set up manufacturing, and they were looking for premises, and they decided that Cumbria was a good central location, right in the middle of where they were to where they were working, Scotland to Cornwall, and they found a good site here in Millom, which is a bit remote, but at the time it was a great location for a number of reasons, and they set up the factory here. At the time it was one unit, and the site you'll see today is considerably bigger. There was one machine at the beginning, one operative, one caravan being used as an office, and today, again, as you'll see, we've got a big fleet of machines and a great team of about 70 to 80 people here on site. Tornado as a business today is 100 plus people. We're about 110 people at the moment, and we sell high quality fencing to the UK, to Ireland and into Europe and across the world.
See, this isn't just about farms. It's about protecting everything from lambs to lions. You only really notice fencing when it doesn't work. Can you explain to me the different types of knots that you use?
So we've got 3 different types of knots. We'd categorise our products by the knot type. So we've got a hinge joint knot, we've got a torus or a square knot, and we've got a tighten or a fixed knot. And those are essentially they're the sort of 3 internationally widely recognised different fence knot types. The hinge joint is a traditional type of fence, a traditional knot, and that's taking, rather than the 3 different wires, that's taking 2 wires together and producing a fence that's flexible and can move around out of 2 different types of wire. The torus and the tighten are both stiff stay type fences. They have a stiff vertical rather than being flexible, and they're essentially doing the same kind of thing, but the tighten's got a much more complicated knot on it, so it produces a stronger and quite often a bigger, physically bigger fence.
Can you just explain the different types of fence that you're producing then and the sort of applications that they cover?
The tighten knot is as I've said, a much more complicated, much stronger knot, much bigger knot, and it tends to be in the more complicated and bigger fences. So some of those fences are going up way beyond 2 metres high. Interestingly, the height isn't always sat above ground, so sometimes that height is buried in the ground to prevent animals digging down into the ground and getting through and sort of burrowing underneath. Sometimes it's going into areas where you've got high snowfall, for example, and when you've had a metre's worth of snowfall, you still want to have 1.5 metres, 2 metres worth of fence above it.
This is the Taurus 5 machine here at Tornado Wire. It produces around 100 rolls of fencing per day, which is equivalent to about 10 kilometres in length. This is one of 5 machines here making the Taurus knot. They take 3 types of wire, a low, medium and a high tensile, and they knit them together. In fact, there's actually 13 knots knitted together 100 times per minute. Tornado Wire have around 240 types of fence, and the main difference being the size of the spacing, depending on the size of the animal that you're trying to keep in. It's also sized to make sure the animal's head doesn't get stuck. Harry, what was the test that you've just done?
This test showed you the tensile strength of the wire and also how much basically it could withhold
Force.
Yeah.
So it read 3,600 newtons of force. So what does that stop? Are we talking deer?
Yeah.
Horse? What about like a 30-year-old overweight man? Anyway, back to the episode.
What separates Tornado in the market, based on the feedback from customers and everything I've heard from the team, is quality. It's the quality of the product, and it comes back to knowing our customer. Having been contractors ourselves, working closely with end users, we develop products that are easy to use and that don't need to be replaced. One of the other things that is absolutely brilliant about Tornado is that a good number of the team here have been on a lot of that journey. Sean, who works here as head of planning, has been here for 42 years. So almost since the very beginning. I think he joined 1 year after the business was set up here. And we've got colleagues with 25, 30 plus years experience. And that is so important in continuing the quality and the customer relationships that we have.
I'm Melissa, I'm the digital marketing apprentice and I've been here for 9 months.
What's the best thing about your job?
The best thing about my job is getting out and about. I get to meet the contractors and kind of understand how the product's actually being used in the field. So I get to go out and see recent projects, or I get to go to events like National Manufacturing Days, which was also really useful for me because I get to understand like how the wire is made, and it's so much easier to try and sell something and market something when you understand what the product's for.
How important have mentors been on this journey?
Definitely really important. My managers really helped me, kind of push me in the direction that I want to go. I've had a wider perspective of basically different marketing, so social media, traditional like writing articles for fencing moves, and it's kind of given me a broad understanding of marketing because she's given me those opportunities to try different things, but it's also helped me decide what I enjoy the most and what I want to go into in the future.
How do you feel as a woman in manufacturing?
I don't think about it. I feel and have always felt as part of the team here at Tornado.
My name's Corey French. I've been here for 9 months and I'm a lean manufacturing operator.
What's the best thing about the apprenticeship?
Probably getting the qualification, then learning inside, like getting my level 2 for machine operator and all that.
Getting paid.
Yeah.
If you were speaking to a kid that's doing their GCSEs, what would you tell them about an apprenticeship?
Best way to learn, get qualifications, better way to get higher paying jobs, all that stuff.
Hi, I'm Ben, I'm 19, I'm a logistics apprentice and I've been here for 7 months.
What does a day-to-day look like?
So I'll prepare work in the office, bring it out onto the shop floor. The lads out here will start to prepare it. It's important that this gets sent out correctly, as customers may end up with the wrong products, and that'll all fall back into the office, so we can look who's prepared the work. Has it gone out correctly? Have I put it out correctly? So that shows a bit of responsibility in my role.
And have you found mentors along the way in the 7 months that you've been here, people that help you?
So my team leader, I work with her in the office every day. She always sets me tasks in the day, things like that. I've got the managers who help me out in the main office. I was taught by the last apprentice who was doing the same role that I did. He taught me the basics and then my team leader sort of took over from there and taught me the more developed things after that.
So how did you go from MD at Hydroscan to CEO at Tornado Wire?
I'd sort of done a massive amount of things at Hydroscan and was thinking about a change. And one of the things that happened with Tornado 4 years ago is that the original owners sold the business to a Swedish investment company, and that company owns and runs SMEs across different countries and leads them in the long term, so responsible shareholders. And they were looking for a CEO to come into the business and move it forward after that sale. So the former owner still sits on our board, but isn't involved day to day. So the CEO role was available. And as I say, what Tornado was looking for matched a lot with my experience, and the values of the company and the shareholders, matched a lot with what the kind of business I want to work in. So it works well for everybody.
And throughout that career, you've had mentors that have helped you along the way?
Yeah, on and off, various different mentors, and I would say one of the best I ever had really was a guy called Paul Lindley, who was a mentor when I worked at SIG. He promoted me into my first general manager's job, and this wasn't a formal mentoring arrangement. It was never sort of sold as that, but he was absolutely such a good advocate for me, standing up for me when I wasn't in the room, supporting me with the challenges of being a general manager for the first time, the right kind of amount of challenge, but also support and challenge in really good measure.
I suppose they're skills that you've brought along as you've grown in your career as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Once you become more senior, you have opportunities to do that for other people, and that is one of the most amazing things about being a leader, is when you see other people developing their careers, achieving things that they wanted to do, achieving things they didn't know they could do. I mean, that is really the absolute best bit.
So let's talk about the staff here then. How many apprentices do you have currently?
So we have a digital marketing apprentice, a logistics apprentice, and then 2 engineering apprentices, although one of them's sort of just graduating, if that's the right word, and then 3 new production apprentices this time, and 2 who are coming to the end of the apprenticeship from a production point of view. So out of 100 people, sort of 7 or 8 apprentices at the moment.
It's a good percentage.
And we'll take another 2 or 3 this September coming.
Amazing.
Again, I'm a huge advocate of apprenticeships, but Tornado's been doing this for years. This isn't something I've brought. It's been going here, and I'm absolutely going to carry it on.
And why apprenticeships? Why Tornado bought into apprenticeships?
So there's 2 ways to look at apprenticeships. One is from the apprentice's point of view. So a friend of mine her son was wondering what to do, just starting A-levels, and he absolutely doesn't want to go to university. He wants to get an apprenticeship, a bit like the young lady who is our marketing apprentice, realises that going to university, a bit like when I didn't go, hugely expensive, and it's brilliant. If you've got a career path, you're definitely going to be something that needs that degree, fine, brilliant, do it. But I think a lot of people have gone because it's just the thing you do after school, not really having thought it through. Whereas apprenticeships, you get on-the-job training, you still get the qualification, you get actual work experience, which is hugely valuable for future employment, and or you get a career in a business that you can stay in, you earn at the same time. So from an apprentice's point of view, huge wins. And from an employer's point of view, you know, for the business, we get to bring young people in and train them in our way. So, you know, they come with no habits, and we can sort of educate people. They can learn, but also add massive value to the business while they're learning. And from a sort of broader sense, not only speaking about Tornado, but, you know, the UK manufacturing and engineering, there's a huge skills problem. And if employers don't bring people in and train people, that isn't going to go away. So we're doing our small bit. It's 7. We're not Rolls-Royce, but we're doing our small bit to bring people into the industry.
So as well as apprentices then, how do you develop the workforce?
I think giving people opportunities is really important. Going back to seeing people achieve things and grow and develop, without those opportunities they can't. And whether that's whether that's the apprentices or our lady who works as a credit controller wanted to get more involved in HR, so we're supporting her to do an HR qualification, and she's adding massive value back into the business, bringing that HR skill set. So it can be running a project. You know, we've installed some new software, and some of the non-management team have been stepped up to lead the project and lead the training. You know, and we try wherever possible to promote people internally. Just done a round of interviews for deputy team leaders, and those people will be from within the business. So it's a number of different ways to give people chances to grow or to try new things and develop their own skills. And again, I think that's really important, to do that as much with the people already in the team.
Yeah, it's part of the skills gap conversation, isn't it? We think about the outside world, all these open vacancies. How do you actually develop people through your own shop floor, as opposed to just hiring constantly?
Yeah, and it's difficult and risky to hire people in from outside. Yes, of course we need to do it. We're a growing business. Of course we're bringing people in, and we will train and develop those people. But where we have people already in the business, and it can mean they stay longer, and that again, it's a win for everybody. So
you don't need to build rockets to be an engineer. Some of the most important engineering is the stuff people never even think about. The product working quietly in the background every single day. Engineering is solving real-world problems, keeping people safe, building things properly, and making sure they still work years later. That's exactly what's happening here at Tornado Wire. And that's exactly why you should become an engineer.